I would like to ask to the podium Denise Roche, Claire Morel, Anton Kurapov, absolutely, and Ferenc Hammer. Can you please take your seats? Please. All right, welcome. Let me start by introducing our panelists. Denise Roche is an advocacy manager at Scholars at Risk European Office, the SAR Europe Office. SAR is an international network of higher education institutions dedicated to protecting threatened scholars, preventing attacks on higher education communities, and promoting academic freedom worldwide. At SAR Europe, hosted at Maynooth University, Ireland, Denise works to expand, coordinate and support advocacy in Europe to promote academic freedom, including convening the European Coordinating Committee for Academic Freedom Advocacy. First question immediately to you. What is the situation at the moment, and why is there a need for such an organization like Scholars at Risk? Can you say a few words about it? You need a microphone because else, yep.
Is it on? Yes. Thank you very much for the introduction. But we'd also, SAR would very much like to thank the STOA panel for inviting us here today, for hosting this event, and for establishing the European Parliament Forum for Academic Freedom. It's incredibly important that we see threats to scholars and academic freedom being discussed at the highest levels. So really, to start, when we're talking about researchers at risk and the threats that they face, I think it's important to recognise the context in which they emerge. And that really is to discuss academic freedom and its current standing across the globe. And I also think, just to begin, at the onset of our conversation, to clarify what we mean by researchers at risk. So we are, of course, talking about researchers, but we're also talking about scholars and scientists from all countries, at all stages of their careers. So that would be doctoral candidates right through to experienced professors and researchers, who are experiencing threats to their life, liberty, or career. And because of those threats, they have become displaced. So how is academic freedom in the world? Well, in recent times, we've seen an explosion of reports and statements and comments emerging from not just the European Union, but the Council of Europe, the European Higher Education Area, the United Nations. And all of this is not happening in a vacuum. It's happening in direct response to the clear recognition that academic freedom is under pressure. And we can say this definitively because we actually have a number of data sets that we can now draw from. So in 2011, SAR established the Academic Freedom Monitoring Project. And this is something where we identify, verify, and publish attacks on academic communities around the world. Then in 2019, we saw the launch of the Academic Freedom Index. And this is a global data set measuring academic freedom levels across about, I think, 179 countries and territories. Looking to Europe, the European University Association, they have been publishing for well over a decade the autonomy scorecard. So that's really looking at the autonomy of our higher education institutions in Europe. And I think the last report covered about 35 countries. So it's wider than the EU membership. And then here at the European Parliament, they have started to commission reports into the state of play of academic freedom within the EU itself. So there's a lot of data to draw from, and just to flag, there are actually several other data sets and monitoring systems under current development. So in the future, there'll be a lot more data to discuss as well. But just to highlight, I suppose, the big picture issues, looking to the Academic Freedom Index, it's reported that over 50% of the world's population now live in countries where academic freedom is in decline. So that's about 4 billion people. SAR's monitoring project, we use this data and it is the basis of our annual Free to Think publication. And in our last publication released just last October, we identified 409 distinct attacks across 66 countries and territories. So that's marking the highest number of attacks that we have seen to date in a given year. Now, the types of attacks we're talking about, they range across the spectrum, from violence, intimidation, prosecution, detention, right through to legislative and administrative measures. And they can lead to very wide-ranging consequences. Loss of life, loss of liberty, loss of position. and right through to self-censorship, something that's incredibly difficult to monitor, but extremely detrimental to the higher education community, but society at large that benefits from the knowledge and skills that is produced there. So we have seen increased pressures on academic freedom, and when you see increased pressures on academic freedom, you see increased threats on individuals. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing more at-risk scholars reaching out for assistance. And part of the work that we do in SAR is we have a protection program. So this is where we place researchers under threat in host institutions throughout our network. So just to give you an idea of the kind of demand that we're seeing. So looking at maybe the fall, in the several weeks after the fall of Kabul, we had about 1,400 applications for assistance. So that would actually represent, in that time period, almost double the entire applications that we would have received the year before from all countries combined. And this year, in our last cycle, we received about over 1,400 applications across the year. We placed 189 scholars. The countries, it was about 33 countries that we saw applications from, but the highest number of applications were coming from Afghanistan, Ukraine, Russia, Ethiopia, Sudan, and Iran. And we, as an organization, we focus in this area. We want to assist scholars to continue their work. We want to promote academic freedom because these are the places where knowledge is created and ideas are exchanged. It's incredibly important for the fabric of a free society. And I think it was the Parliamentary Assembly at the Council of Europe, when they were looking at threats to academic freedom and threats to institutional autonomy several years ago, they remarked that historically these threats have always led to intellectual collapse and social and economic stagnation. So there's a lot at stake here. But I'm very happy to actually be able to say, though, while sitting here, that Europe is at the forefront of recognizing threats and offering assistance to researchers under pressure. So for my own organization, about over half our membership, our institutional membership, is here in Europe. And they offer over half the hosting places here in Europe. Our institutions organize themselves on a regional and national basis, and a large number of these sections are here in Europe, and that's how they organize activities to promote academic freedom, to raise awareness, but also to support researchers under pressure. And following the crisis is in Afghanistan and in Ukraine, we actually did see an outpouring of support and lots of volunteering to host more scholars. I would also like to say, and to commend actually the European Commission in this area, because they've actually been doing a lot of work. And they fund the Inspire Europe Plus program. So this is a program that SAR administers in conjunction with partners across Europe, and it's really to source better supports for researchers at risk in Europe. And there's a lot of activities in connection to these programs. Webinars to support researchers at risk to network, to produce research applications, but also these are programs that I seek to support institutions to actually host scholars. And it's an incredibly important program because it also identifies gaps in supports and seeks to make policy recommendations. And one of the strongest policy recommendations I think that's emerged out in recent years has been for the call for the establishment of a permanent EU dedicated fellowship program for researchers at risk. So this would really support not just the individuals under pressure, but it would signal that the EU holds academic freedom in high regard. Yeah. I would also, just to finish, to commend actually the EU as well for taking such quick action and decisive action following the crisis in Ukraine and establishing the MSc for Ukraine Fellowship Program, really assisting displaced researchers from Ukraine. And I think that fellowship program has about 124 fellows at the moment. So, and SAR Europe is incredibly proud to be actually a part of the consortium that administers this scheme in conjunction with the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation in Germany and the European Universities Association. But I think I'll leave it there because I know fellow panelists will have much to add.
Absolutely. You made the bridge already to Claire, because I saw Claire smiling, and that means that you're doing a good job, Claire. Let me just give a short introduction about you. Claire Morel. She's the head of unit in charge of the Marie Skolodas-Curie program at the European Commission's Directorate General for Education. And the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions fund excellent research and innovation and equip researchers with new knowledge and skills through mobility across borders and exposure to different sectors and disciplines. And you also have been quite instrumental, your unit, your department, your DG, in indeed setting up schemes for scientists at risk, Ukraine, and now, of course, the preparatory action of the European Parliament. Can you say a few words about it? I think you even have slides, or not?
Yes, I have some slides, but I can speak without slides.
Okay, without slides. Go ahead. Yes. Can you explain a little bit what these actions contain, what is going on?
Yeah, I will explain, but I think Denise has already introduced very well what we do at the Commission, in particular in the framework of the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Action, which I think is one of the few programs, action that really concretely support researchers at risk. We've heard this morning that the issue of academic freedom and support to researchers at risk is not new. If you look at recent policy declaration, communication of the Commission, the issue of fundamental values has been mentioned in the European Strategy for Universities, in the Bologna declaration at the last ministerial meeting of the Bologna process, the communication on the global approach as well for research and innovation. Everywhere there is very strong, I think, support of the Commission and the EU to these issues, including through, for example, developing a monitoring system with indicators as part of the Bologna process. So why would a program like the one for which I'm in charge be interested in supporting? Because you might know that the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Action is quite a selective program. It's a competitive program which is open to the whole world to support researchers at all stages of their career, which means that it's open to researchers at risk. But we feel that cannot be excellent science without the diversity of scientific views, scientific approaches. While discussing with organizations in charge of researchers at risk, they told us, okay, your program is open to researchers at risk, but in reality, they do not necessarily have the skills. They don't necessarily know the European landscape for European programs. You have tight deadlines, you have mobility rules, and this is not, I mean, this makes it very difficult for them.
Not user-friendly, yeah.
Not very user-friendly, especially for researchers at risk. So a few years ago, we decided to develop a new policy action, which is called Inspire Europe, which Scholars at Risk is one of the members, which does not directly support researchers at risk, but allows universities, organizations, I mean, like Scholars at Risk, but also the PAUSE program in France or the Philipp Schwarz initiative in Germany, to develop mentoring programs, to training programs, to support researchers in applying for European programs, for national programs, and to find hosting organizations. So we are already in the second phase of this scheme, and we'll be launching next year a new call for proposal for another similar project. Then, when the war in Russia started, we launched MSCA for Ukraine. It was the first time that something like this was done in the framework of MSCA. MSCA is a bottom-up program, which means that it's open to, as I said, to any scientific field, to any researcher in the world, and we do not have targeted calls. But of course, given the very specific circumstances, we very quickly, for let's say European standards, very quickly launched a call for proposals with the same group of organizations that is in charge of Inspire Europe, allowing a very quick recruitment of displaced researchers from Ukraine. We now have 124 such researchers who are continuing their research in a European organization. They can be universities, they can be research centers, they could be enterprises as well. Anton, who is sitting next to me, in fact, is a beneficiary of that program. And one important aspect of that scheme is that we are trying to keep the scientific contacts with the organization in Ukraine, which means that once it will be possible, we hope that researchers will be able to continue their to cooperate with their organizations in Ukraine and go back to Ukraine and resume their research there. In the framework, I forgot to mention that in the framework of Inspire Europe, we developed as well guidelines on how to host researchers at risk, with not only within MSCA, but also in any organization interested in hosting researchers at risk. It provides also concrete example of organizations that have done so. And finally, with the support of Mr. Ehler, the Commission has accepted to implement a new preparatory action coming from the Parliament.
And that's your department who's implementing it?
It's my department as well. Yes, exactly. It's done. It's not a bit outside the Marie-Claude Secretary action because it cannot be done in the framework of Horizon Europe because of the specific legal, let's say, framework of the preparatory action. But we are currently evaluating this scheme, which will, so the idea of a preparatory action is that the Parliament asks the Commission to implement it, and if it proves to be positive, relevant, to work well, it could become a full-fledged action program or action in the future. And
you have defined already the terms of reference and the calls and everything.
So yes, so we are currently evaluating the call. And we will soon give the result of the organization that will be chosen to, in turn, launch a call to identify those researchers at risk, to develop as well guidelines on how to select such researchers at risk. So they will test it with the idea of financing around 30 researchers at risk. And as I said, if the scheme proves to be relevant, we know it's relevant, but to be, let's say, successful, this is something that could become in the future a new action that could take place in the framework of a program like the successor of Horizon Europe, or maybe under another legal framework.
Thank you very much. Impressive new program. Quite interesting to see how that will turn out. You mentioned already Anton Kurapov. You're assistant professor at the Department of Experimental and Applied Psychology at Kyiv National University. And you are benefiting from the scheme, the dedicated scheme for Ukrainian scientists. And could you say a few words about your experience, why this was necessary, and what has it allowed you to do?
Yeah, sure. First of all, it's my greatest pleasure to be here and talk. Thank you for attention. Thank you for launching this program. It's been sort of a life-changing experience, at least for me, and due to several reasons. I'm currently, as been mentioned several times, MSc for Ukraine Fellow, currently stationed at the University of Salzburg, Laboratory for Sleep and Consciousness Research. So, as a scientist, in my response, I have to be systematic and clear, or at least mimic systematicity and clarity. So I brought some visual aid, which is called REM. In sleep science, REM stands for rapid eye movement, and this is the most active phase of your sleep cycle. So in the context of MSCA for Ukraine Fellowship, REM I would specify as three major aspects, which are resources, expertise, and motivation. So what does that mean? I'll try to explain. Resources and why resources are important. We tried to establish the cooperation with the University of Salzburg long and good before COVID times, and the people there were wondering how come your university cannot purchase you an equipment for like 30,000 euros, for example. And we've spent 3 years trying to get the eye tracker that costs around 800 euros. What you think? Unsuccessful. So basically with the resources that are provided with this program, what we aim to, and a little bit about what we do. We try to help Ukrainians sleep better through the smartphone application in the context of the current situation in Ukraine, which is actually doubtful at the very beginning. Whether it is possible, we have some preliminary data showing that it might be successful. So the resources allowed us to create a nice looking app, because usually there is an impression that whatever is scientific should look ugly. But in our context, this is the combination of scientifically based intervention that also looks nice. And with the resources, we also, this is a very rough estimate. I think at least from 8,000 to something to 12,000 Ukrainians were at least aware that we are running this project and we invite participants. So based on that, resources are important. Expertise, what does it mean in the context of the MSc for Ukraine Fellowship? At least in my personal experience, expertise means people that I'm working with. According to the program requirements, I have to have one major or a dominant academic mentor. In my case, I have 3, and they are amazing. Why they are amazing? First of all, they are smart. You would probably ask me, are there any non-smart people in academia? I met a few, but these guys are very, very intelligent, smart. They also know what they do. And in addition to knowing what they do, they are passionate about that and they love that. So they literally, I assume, wake up early in the morning thinking, okay, we have to finish that paper. Okay, how are we going to finish the discussion? So in addition to that, they're open-minded, ready to help, dedicate time to teaching. What was, for me, very astonishing, probably, I would say, how they value time, not their time, the time of others as well. So they do not overload you with work. It's not like in Ukraine, you get the message at 11 p.m. from your boss saying, actually, you should have done that yesterday, but I'm informing you now that you have to do something, spend the night. That's normal. And with this attitude towards time, it allows to maintain the proper work-life balance. We had the discussion a little bit earlier that I'm still learning to have this proper work-life balance, since for me it's mainly work balance. And I'll explain why, coming to the M, to the motivation. I'm not sure if it's appropriate to raise up the numbers, but they would allow you to get a little bit more clear picture of the Ukrainian scientific situation. And I have to mention that I'm coming from social sciences, the background, but the situation is similar probably everywhere. So the starting salary of the Ukrainian scientist, just after you finish your PhD, are you ready? From 100 to 300 euros, depending on the institution. So what do scientists have to do? In addition to resorting to legal actions, work additional jobs. In my case, that was 3 jobs, which means extended working hours, night shifts, literally no weekend. And you also have to teach, you also have to prepare lectures. So I still wonder how I can look relatively fine, no gray hair, and without any experience, hospital experience with the stroke. So MSc for Ukraine Fellowship finally showed me that there is a chance to focus on one major project with a couple of side projects, of course. And that is actually possible. So right now I can work up to 12 to 14 hours, but not because I have to, because the tasks have been piling up, but just because I can't stop, simply. I just started and I'm just like, okay, I'm working. So, yeah, this is an important aspect. And in this context, MSc for Ukraine, funded by the European Union, is tremendous opportunity because you learn. Like, no, you're engaged in the environment, you learn, and you grow automatically or unintentionally. Either you want it or not, it's still happening. You're becoming more ambitious, consequently. And ambitions then allow you to think of what else can you do to improve the life, not only Ukrainians, but entire humanity. So even though it's been a very tough competition, I'm very glad to be a part of it. So thank you for the initiative again, and thank you for attention.
All right, thank you very much. Good, well done. I turn to the last member of the panel, the Ferenc. You are currently serving as a research fellow at the New Institute in Hamburg, and you're on sabbatical from your position at the ELTE Utfes Lodron University in Budapest. And you are doing a lot of research and give policy advice on certain dimensions relating to silencing, self-censorship and intimidation in academia. And you are also thinking about a kind of a mentoring program. Can you say a few words about your activities and how you try to contribute to scientists at risk?
Thank you very much. Again, also I'm very grateful that I can participate in this great panel. So basically, my work is about how life is in troubled times for academicians all around the world, and of course, the key concepts that I'm using is academic freedom, scholars at risk, university autonomy, and basically, what I've been doing is first of all, I do a research on these various scholars at risk initiatives. What are they doing? What are the overlaps? What are the things that nobody is doing? That kind of things. And also, in a way, I try to understand it in a kind of a normative framework, saying that what are the loopholes? What are the perhaps unintended negative consequences, etc. I mean, this typical critical kind of approach to this. And the other is also I'm thinking about how to contribute with new concepts to existing measurements for academic freedom. And the one thing that I found in my work is that no matter that, for instance, the academic index portrays global academic freedom as like basically 5 distinct continents, based with different colors. Hungary happens to be, I think, orange. And but at the same time, we all know that academic freedom all around the world, and even sometimes within countries, is something which can be really more meaningfully portrayed on a continuum. Where one end would be like clear, like really troublesome countries where helping academics would be equal to humanitarian risk, and then very often not only academics should be supported, but taxi drivers or housewives or anybody basically. And the other end is basically very often in democratic countries, these are the very harsh debates, sometimes fights within the university, and most of them about freedom of speech. That I think very often it's basically discussing what university autonomy means today. In 2023. So, and in between the two extremes, so to say, is the real world. So basically, one of my observations is that this conceptualizing this spectrum thing can have important implications. One is it has to do with time, actually, meaning that very often these yearly reports concentrate on what happened this year in this country, what's happened in that country. And of course, they are concentrating on events very often. Events, cases, individuals, etc. But very often, we could see it in various reports. Very often, there is like a sliding phenomena in academic freedom when each year's development is not so something which would be extraordinary, because as we discussed it previously, who hasn't seen a cutting back of a research branch at a research program, of course. But at the same time, if you put together on a time scale this kind of developments, there's a new picture comes. So that's one thing. The other is basically, and that's basically my most important part of my research, is about silence. How to measure silence. Do we have a microphone for silence? How to understand how to understand intimidation, self-censorship. You know, I rather do this to remain under the radar. You know, why not to rename my research social roles in the family instead of gender studies, you know, these kind of things. But at the same, and you know, make no mistake, I mean, all research, there are lots of millions of researchers around the world whose their most important motivation is survive, do their research, and possibly not getting into the next year's free-to-think report by scholars at risk. Okay? But do I call it academic freedom? No, not anymore. No. All right? So, and in this case, and in all of the scholars at risk operations around the world, there is how many people altogether? 1,000 perhaps, or perhaps less, or a little more. But the people I'm talking about, there are millions of people. Millions of researchers, and basically I try to conceptualize some sort of a help for this kind researchers in this kind of life situation.
And that includes the publishing tool you're thinking about.
Oh yeah, that's the funky part. Yeah, yeah, because you know I think it's very simple because if there are researchers who are in a kind of a gray zone. Because they still try to survive, they still try to publish, they still try to live their life as if they were like normal people, so to say. But at the same time, if there would be some sort of a support, then I think there should be some sort of a homology of the life situation and the tools with which we want to have them. So of course, if we do a big fanfare and, oh, we are going to support the scholars who are being silenced. Okay, who would be the first to wake up? The Secret Service of the given country, yeah? And of course, they would try how to abuse these kind of things. But at the same time, so that's one is for individual mentoring could be very important. That's my idea. And also, believe it or not, anonymous publishing. I mean, publishing with not your real name, and developing a system for that. But please don't mention it in your article because I want to keep it secret.
That's still being developed.
Absolutely, it's still.
Perhaps what we may do, because I look at the clock a little bit, and also there may be people in the audience who would like to ask.
Yeah, let's go to the.
Because I think we have a lot of say interesting activities with regard to scientists, researchers at risk. Dedicated scheme now of the European Commission, a new development into that thanks to the European Parliament. We have here a specific case study, beneficiary of the scheme. So let's see if there's any questions in the audience related to what we just heard, the arrangements, the schemes, the support measures for researchers at risk. And I think this idea of having this group offering the possibility to publish not in their name but in a number is an interesting one, although people may even be very scared to publish under a number and not under their name. This whole idea about silence and how can we avoid silence, I think that's quite an interesting one. So who would like to ask a question to this panel? There should not be silence now. Gosse.
Thank you. My name is Gosse Fauk. I'm the assistant of Christian Ehler, and actually a quick bridge to the other breakout session where we're talking about the methodology of the monitor and coming back to the question of silence. Do you think there's a way we can include silence in the monitor in some way, or what kind of data could we look at to include it in the monitor to make it visible for us as policymakers?
Yeah. I think it's a very interesting one, a very difficult one. So, Ferenc, if you have an
well, actually, you know, I'm coming from media studies. And in some way, I'm a freedom of speech scholar, and actually, in the academic freedom index, there is one. So there is like a set of variables which are concentrating on self-censorship. And actually they took, I read the code book, and they took it precisely from research measuring the freedom of the press. So it's absolutely not a coincidence that it was a handy methodology. So it's already in the academic freedom index.
Good. So it's covered
at this moment. Yes.
Good. All right. I look again at the clock. Thanks to the panel, give them a big round of applause. And because we need to move on with regard to the next speakers, and some people have to catch a plane, so I'm therefore quite strict with regard to the time. Thanks a million, and I propose a big round of applause to the audience.